Hello, and welcome to the Andy West Bass Tape. I'd like to talk about several different things today, the six-string bass playing in several contexts. I have two groups that I'm working with. One is Zazen, an electronic music group that uses a lot of keyboards and drum machines, sequencers, etc., things of this nature to illustrate different concepts of a more formal, structured playing with a six-string bass. In addition, we have Crazy Backwards Alphabet, which is another group that I work with, and that is a more traditionally orchestrated group, guitar, bass, and drums, and traditional only in the orchestration, however, as you'll find out in terms of the music. I'd like to discuss some of the advantages and disadvantages of playing the six-string bass, and basically different concepts of playing, writing, arranging, and improvising within these two different formats. A key point of this tape that I want to get across here is that this is not really a how to get chops kind of tape. That's for another deal. You know, in other words, oh, I play these kind of scales and work on this kind of thing every day, that kind of thing. This is more to inspire you to think differently about different kinds of music and basically have fun with it. The kind of stuff that I do right now is have fun playing with these guys here. So that's basically where that's at. Talk about the six-string bass. This is a bass that I designed. It happens to be made by Modulus Graphite, San Francisco. And there's some obvious advantages to the six-string bass. One is just the range of the instrument. Go all the way several octaves here, and you can play many positions. This is just a brief overview here. Many positions, a real high range with just very little movement. Also, one of the neatest things that I found when I first got this bass was the fact that there are octaves everywhere. You know, you can get that sort of eight-string bass kind of concept. Another thing is playing chords on the bass. You don't generally get that kind of a sound from a traditional bass. I have a vibrato on this bass as I was using before, and basically I can use it to just bend into different notes. That type of thing. Little effects here and there. The six-string bass is an awesome concept, trust me, okay? It opens up a whole new range of playing. For instance, the type of stuff that I do in this group Zazen is things that just couldn't be done on a regular four-string bass. Some of the disadvantages are that it takes a little while longer to learn it. You have to really put in the time on the scales because otherwise you're sitting there going, well, where am I? What's this note? That kind of thing. You know, you can get around that if you just practice. So it's a little more difficult to learn, a little bit more difficult to slap on, and they're expensive. The rewards are really worth it, though, as you'll see. At this point, I'd like to introduce my companions in this group. Again, the name of the group is Zazen. I have Steve Kaplan over here on keyboards. He's a studio synthesist and composer, as well as full-time member of this group. And over here on guitar, we have Joaquin Lievino. Joaquin is a solo artist. He has an album out on Global Pacific Records called One Mind. What we're going to do is we're going to take apart a song that Zazen wrote. This song is called Searching for the Ox, and it's based on Japanese Zen drawings. It's actually a very long piece, about 15 minutes, but we're going to take 7 minutes of it, cut it up, show you how we did it. Okay, and I think this will be instructive in terms of learning how to write music, how to put maybe this type of bass playing into the context of your own music. Okay, so we're starting in the middle of the song. Basically, I think we'll just start with playing this one segment, the first segment of the song. Again, it starts with some keyboards and sequences. I come in playing bass melodies. Guitar comes in and keyboard comes in sort of a fugue-like manner. But I'll discuss the breakdown of it after we perform it. So we're going to play the first segment of this, Searching for the Ox, and see what happens here. So that was the first segment. It sounded nice and floaty and stuff. The way we deal with that is we have a lot of different counter rhythms going on, rhythms and counter sequences. A key element to writing music like this and having it stay interesting is using different rhythms and polyrhythms and whatnot. One of the things about this piece is the tempo stays the same throughout the whole piece from the beginning to the end, but the pulse changes, so where you're feeling the downbeat and whatnot changes. This is a real easy way to make music interesting. For instance, on that part that we just played, it starts off with the sequences, upper sequences are playing in 3, basically. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We add the drums to that, and the drums are in 4. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, see how the drums come in on a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of feel. Sequences are still playing along in 3. The bass comes in, and now what I'm going to do is I play elements of both. In other words, I come in. Now, when I go to this, I start to hit more in the 4. You know, so I get more of the don, 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 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of feel. Melodies come in over it, also employing different elements. So let's just play the last little section of it together with all 3 melodies, and you can sort of hear how that sounds and feels with all the different kinds of 3s and 4s grouped together. Okay, so you get the point. That's how we do different kinds of 3s and 4s over each other, and yet it still maintains a real smooth kind of attitude throughout it. Okay, this next section that we're going to go to is basically in 3 sub-segments with a lot of pulse shifts and different timings. The drums go from that 4 to a slow, heavy 3 feel. Okay, so they're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Now they're going to go in the same pulse, 3s. Okay, the upper sequences maintain that high kind of floaty 3 feel. Why don't you play the upper sequences, please, Steve? 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. Now the bass and drums on the bottom are playing a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you can hear that. Okay, you get the idea there. I'm playing 1, 2, 3, so a real heavy kind of 3 feel. Okay, and when you put all of them together, again, you get more of a floaty aspect to the whole thing, and it comes along together. So why don't we play all that part, just that little segment, sub-segment together. Okay, in this next segment, what happens is the bass actually starts to move into a slightly different kind of transition. I'm playing faster groupings, again, in a total of 6, but more or less grouped in terms of 4 and 2, instead of groupings of like septuplets or triplets or anything like that. So it's like... And that turns into... As opposed to... Okay, so you get that last one was more along the 4 and 2 lines. So you get the idea. You can basically move a feel just by where you're placing accents. Again, this is kind of a key element of music, and I use it a lot in my bass playing, is the concept of hitting the beat really hard to accent those different kind of rhythms and stuff. Another thing that happens in the music that we do, we use the sequencer to double the bass a lot on the low end so that I can play more high lines and not lose any of the body. I can play some of this stuff down low, obviously, but sometimes it sounds cleaner just to have like a nice low tone, and then I can play more notes up on top and improvise over it without getting in the way of the lowness. So that sounds like this. We'll just play this little segment here, and I'll just play along with drums, bass, synthesizer, and bass guitar before we do the whole thing. Okay, so you see, I can play in the upper range, and we still have plenty of bottom there to deal with. Okay, in this next segment, what we're going to do is the bass is going to play with a very heavy cross rhythm kind of feel. I have to count differently from the way the drums are playing. Okay, so the drums are playing with a certain kind of feel, but I'm going to count differently over that. The beat that I'm playing against is actually only implied, so there's no instrument that's really doing this. I have to feel it, okay? Now what that does is it gives a much more dynamic kind of excitement to it because the bass is actually playing against something that's not there. We're going to illustrate this. Steve is going to play the hi-hat live with just quarter notes, okay? So he's going to be playing a live pulse that's not there on the basic track, but just so you can see how I'm feeling the time. And then when we play the whole section together, while it sounds like this whole thing is just sort of exploding time-wise, I'm actually locking into a pulse that I'm feeling and counting internally. The hi-hat on the drum part is actually in 3. So we're going to play this together, and it'll be just bass and drums. We'll add the other parts in later. They're, again, playing in a real straight-ahead kind of 3 feel over this real abstract bass and drum part. So see how this sounds. Okay, so you see how I was feeling a 1, 2, 3, 4, like that kind of feel. Everyone else is going it over, dun, 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 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's how that whole segment fits together, and again, you'll hear how the whole thing fits when we play the entire piece for you. This next segment is built actually on a polyrhythm. The 16th note remains the same throughout the whole thing. So in other words, we have these things that are going along going, okay, and that's 16th note triplets. Da, 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 da. We turn that into 16th notes on a quarter note beat, so it becomes like instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which leads us into a whole nother feel, but again, the pulse stays the same throughout. So you see, this is another way to overlay rhythms and get a real tricky sense of time happening without actually changing a fundamental element of the music. Let's give an example of that, Steve. Why don't you play that little part? Okay, now you see how that led us from a 3 feel into a Okay, now I bet you thought we were in 4/4. Well, not really. This next section is designed basically just to fool you. You get into a groove, a real straight ahead kind of 4 feel with a heavy drum, just kind of pattern. But we start overlaying all these different times to it. Now, what you should notice about this next section is how natural it feels. It's definitely a pulse, definitely a groove, but we're going to play all these odd times over it. One of the keys to using odd times effectively is to make them sound natural. a lot of the tendency for players when they start to learn about different time feels and stuff is to play real jerkily, you know, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, real jerky, odd, weird kind of things. That's a great way to learn, but then when you start to incorporate it into your music, you want to make it more musical, more natural. So what we do in this section is we have the drums hitting a real heavy 2-4, okay? The bass, which actually I found out later, we sort of wrote this together, and I just started playing this line, as it turns out, is in 13-8. A chord pattern fits over it in 13-4. So what that means is that every 2 times through the chord cycle, we end up on 1 together with making a complete kind of phrase. Okay, so let's see how that fits together. We're going to just start with the drums. I'll come in with the bass, and then Steve will add in the chords, and you'll see how everything fits together and still gives a real heavy groove, real heavy pulse to it all. Basic 1, 2. So what we do is we establish this real heavy kind of dance groove, but it's actually in an odd time with an odd melody over the top of it, so it sounds even more bizarre. We go into another segment now, which is a similar in thematic concepts, okay, but it just has, the bass is playing an upper octave. It's all in 7 now. We go smoothly from, you know, this odd thing into 7, but still with a heavy backbeat, so you don't feel it change. Meanwhile, we're doubling on the lower octave. I'm playing the upper octave, so we get a real nice, tight, round bass sound. And let's just play that section. It'll just be bass, lower bass on the synth, and drums, just to give you the feel of what we're going into. And this is all in 7. Okay, the reason that section works, they continue to play the chords over it with the same kind of backbeat, pushy kind of feel. Okay, and that all works to lend credibility to a smoothness that's actually not there because this part is in 7. This leads us into the final segment of the song, which is a really interesting section. This is something that Steve and I worked on together when we wrote it together, actually. Again, the whole purpose of discussing this is sort of basically to get you into the mindset that can develop things like this and in this manner. We basically had some chords, okay, and then started off with a set of chords, and I came up with bass notes based on just one chord at a time. I sat down and worked with Steve and came up with different lines, you know, just based on the chords that he had, made notes work. We strung it all together, and we come up with this very long line of steady 16th notes. I didn't have to conceive it, though, at one time because of the way that we use the computer. I come up with a couple of notes and say, God, I like the way this fits. Let's put it in the computer. So we put it into the computer on a bass synthesizer patch, and then I continue composing with him. When we get done with it, play it back, and by now I can't play the thing because I've forgotten the first part that I wrote, but I did write it. So take it home and learn how to play the whole thing, and you end up with some really neat stuff. Another thing that happened after we had the bass line and the chords put together, Steve went ahead and improvised some chord punches over it. I want you to give an example of the chord punches first, and then I'll play some of the bass line. Is that okay? All right. Fine with you, right? That's great. What that points out is there's a lot of punchy little 16th note things, okay? So what we did then was we took out key bass notes that were hitting at the same time as the chords. And this gave this kind of effect, you know, like you've got down, low notes, and then chord punches with no sound, and then down, low notes. We didn't take out all the bass notes, but just on the downbeat of his little stabs and whatnot. Doubled that with a lower octave. I play in an upper octave. he plays the chords, and it sounds really cool. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've broken down all these segments of this one particular song, showing you a lot of different odd times and how we cross polyrhythms and interweave all these different elements and parts. Now we're going to put it together in a complete song and perform it as a group. And this song is actually a segment of a larger piece called Searching for the Ox. So we're going to start in the middle again and play the entire piece right now. now for something completely different. What we have here is a band that's called Crazy Backwards Alphabet, composed of 3 musicians. On guitar, we have from the Guitar Player Advisory Board, Mr. Henry Kaiser, and he's going to be playing the guitar. On drums, we have John French, a.k.a. Drumbo, formerly of Captain Beefheart, presently of Crazy Backwards Alphabet. I should explain something about the concept behind this group. We actually do this basically for fun. We have a couple albums out on SST Records, one called Crazy Backwards Alphabet. And the idea is that we play amongst each other and freely with each other. It's a little bit different than the previous thing, okay? So what we do is we have, for instance, in the song we're going to perform now, it's got basically a structured head that moves freely within time. Remember on the other stuff where we're going real solidly counting and whatnot, this has a different kind of approach where we'll do hits based on, okay, we start here and we go to this point and that kind of thing, but it's all very planned out, at least in the, melodic head of the song. At that point, after we do the head, we go into more free-form improvisation. Now, the thing about this is it's real easy for people when they improvise in a rock format to just get into a real noise or just do a traditional blues. We kind of get out of that with this. I play my solo based around a tonal center, and basically I start off and lead the guys. They're following me, sort of the moves that I make in a graphic sense. Eventually, they start to push in from behind, and it just goes into whatever kind of direction that we want it. And you'll see a lot of interplay amongst us, and that's basically what I want you to look for on this performance, is that interplay, that kind of relationship that develops in a live performance. Okay, so this song is a tune which is called Dropped D. It's on our album, and it's written by a person named Bob Adams. So without further ado, we'd like to perform this song for you. Check out, again, the relationship between the bass and drums at the beginning of the solo where I'm sort of leading them along, and then they start to push in over it, and we go into some interesting places. This next song that we're going to do is an interesting excursion into some other worlds. This thing is an old jazz song by saxophonist Albert Ayler, and it represents a certain sort of free style of playing that we've sort of incorporated into our being and modernized, however you'll experience it. The concept behind this song, by the way, is called Ghosts, is that we have sort of a nice little ditty melody that we start off with, and Henry and I are playing back and forth very freely. I mean, we're just basically outlining the shape of the melody. It's not really concerned with timing and stuff like that so much as it is with just a feel, outlining the shapes. In addition, we go into a new section in the middle where our solos are, where we slam on the fuzzes and go for a screaming, soaring, vibrato, twangy kind of concept. Okay, so you'll get that. Again, this song has a lot to do with shapes. So what I'm trying to get across here is that there are some other ways to approach music, and you can incorporate them however you will. Before we do this, I'd like to say thanks to the folks at Backstage Pass and to you for checking out this tape, and I hope that it's given you some insight and some new viewpoints. That's mainly all we tried to do here. So that's the deal, and this is called Ghosts.